My husband Mark and I pulled up to the venue where my sister Lily's wedding was about to take place. The envelope with $10,000 was tucked safely in Mark's jacket pocket, our wedding gift to Lily. On top of that, we'd already covered about a third of the wedding expenses. It was a lot of money, but Mark's investment banking job and my position as a marketing director meant we could afford it. Plus, Lily was my only sister. As we walked in, I spotted my parents immediately. Mom was fussing with Dad's tie while he pretended to be annoyed, but I could see the smile playing at his lips. They looked radiant. That was the only word for it. Mom's face was practically glowing with happiness, and Dad looked 10 years younger. Something twisted in my gut. I couldn't remember them looking this happy at my wedding 5 years ago. They'd been pleasant enough, sure, but not like this, not bursting with pride and joy. I quickly pushed the thought away. This wasn't the time to drag up old feelings. The ceremony went perfectly. Lily looked stunning in her dress, and her fiancé, now husband, Jake, couldn't take his eyes off her. I sat between my parents and Mark, trying to focus on the happiness of the day rather than the nagging feeling that my parents' reactions were somehow different than they had been at my wedding. After the ceremony came the reception. We ate, drank, danced, and then it was time for the speeches. First the best man, then the maid of honor, and finally my parents stood up together. Mom tapped her glass gently. "We want to thank everyone for coming today to celebrate our beloved daughter's wedding." There was something about the way she emphasized beloved that made me shift uncomfortably in my seat. Mark must have noticed because he placed his hand over mine. Dad continued, "Watching Lily grow into the beautiful woman she is today has been the greatest joy of our lives. She's always been special, always brought so much light into our home." I smiled and nodded, wondering if I was just being oversensitive. Of course they loved Lily. They loved both of us. Then Mom reached into her purse and pulled out some papers. "Jake, Lily, your father and I wanted to give you something to start your new life together. Something special." She held up the papers for everyone to see. "We're giving you our family home as a wedding present." The room erupted in gasps followed by thunderous applause. I froze. Beside me, Mark went rigid. I stared at my parents, then at Lily, waiting for someone to laugh and say it was a joke. But it wasn't. My parents were beaming proudly, and Lily didn't look surprised at all. She was crying happy tears, hugging Jake, who was staring at my parents with his mouth hanging open. The house, my parents' house. The house with the mortgage I'd been paying for the last 5 years because my parents couldn't afford it anymore after Dad's hours got cut and Mom's arthritis made it hard for her to work full-time. I managed to plaster a smile on my face, but inside I was screaming. Not once, not once. Had they mentioned giving the house to Lily? They hadn't even asked me, and I was the one paying for it. "Tessa, you okay?" Mark whispered. "Fine," I said through my teeth, still smiling as Lily and Jake made their way to the front to hug my parents. An hour later, I couldn't take it anymore. I found Mark by the bar. "Can we leave?" I asked quietly. He took one look at my face and nodded. "I'll get our coats." We made our excuses. Mark had an early meeting, we were so sorry, such a beautiful wedding, congratulations again, and left before anyone could protest too much. The second we got in the car, I burst into tears. "I can't believe they did that," I sobbed as Mark started the engine. "I've been paying that mortgage for 5 years. And they didn't even tell me they were planning this." "I know," Mark said grimly, "it's unbelievable." "And Lily knew, did you see her face?" "She wasn't surprised at all." I wiped at my eyes angrily. "This isn't about the money, I don't care about the money. But they could have talked to me first." As we drove home, memories kept flooding back, all the times my parents had shown clear favoritism toward Lily. Remember when I graduated college, and they gave me a card with $50, but when Lily graduated 2 years later, they bought her a car. That wasn't right, Mark agreed. Or my 21st birthday dinner that they skipped because Lily had a volleyball game? A game. Not even a championship or anything important. The more I talked, the more examples I remembered. Each time Lily got what she wanted while I got overlooked or forgotten. How my parents attended all of Lily's events but found excuses to miss mine. How they bragged about Lily's accomplishments but barely mentioned mine. By the time we got home, I was exhausted from crying and talking. "Where are your parents going to live now?" Mark asked as we got ready for bed. "If they're giving the house to Lily and Jake?" I shrugged, pulling on my pajamas. "I have no idea, that's not my problem anymore." I turned off the light and rolled over, trying to ignore the ache in my chest. For the next 3 weeks, I went to work, came home, and tried not to think about the wedding or the house or any of it. Then one evening, my phone rang. It was my mother. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Tessa, honey," Mom said, as if nothing had happened. "We're having a family dinner this weekend. Your sister and Jake are back from their honeymoon, and we'd love for you and Mark to join us." I wanted to say no, I wanted to hang up. But some part of me, probably the stupid, hopeful part, wondered if maybe they'd apologize. Maybe they'd explain. "Fine," I said flatly, "we'll be there." Saturday arrived too quickly. When we pulled up, I noticed Lily's car in the driveway along with my parents' old sedan. We walked up to the front door, and I hesitated before ringing the bell. It felt weird not using my key, but this wasn't my parents' house anymore. It was Lily and Jake's. Mom answered, all smiles. "Tessa, Mark, come in, come in." She hugged me like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't given away the house I'd been paying for without even talking to me about it. I hugged her back stiffly. Dad was in the living room with Jake, watching a game. He stood up when we entered, giving Mark a firm handshake and me a quick hug. "Where's Lily?" I asked, noticing her absence. "Oh, she's changing the curtains in the dining room," Mom said casually. "She's been redecorating all week." My blood boiled at that. 3 weeks, it had been 3 weeks since the wedding, and Lily was already changing things around like she'd owned the place for years. We walked through to the dining room, and there she was. My sister, standing on a stepladder, hanging new cream-colored curtains in place of Mom's old blue ones. "Dinner's ready," Mom announced, "everyone sit down." We took our seats, me between Mark and Dad, with Mom and Lily across from us and Jake at the end of the table. The food looked good, Mom's special pot roast with all the trimmings, but I had no appetite. The first 10 minutes were filled with Lily and Jake describing their honeymoon in Hawaii in excruciating detail. I picked at my food and nodded occasionally, while Mark asked appropriate questions to keep the conversation going. Finally, when Lily paused to take a breath, Mom cleared her throat. "So, we wanted to talk to you about something, Tessa," she said. "Well, as you know, we've given the house to Lily and Jake as their wedding present." "Yes, I noticed," I said flatly. Mom continued as if she hadn't heard the edge in my voice. "The thing is, they're a young couple starting their life together. They need their own space." I remained silent, waiting for her to get to the point. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "What your mother is trying to say," he said, "is that we can't live here with them. They need privacy." "I see," I said, still not sure where this was going. "So where are you planning to live?" Mom and Dad exchanged another look. I noticed Lily suddenly became very interested in her mashed potatoes. "Well," Mom said slowly, "we've been thinking about it, and we've decided we're going to move to your vacation home. It's the perfect size for us, and it's in a nice, quiet area." I set down my fork and knife carefully. The vacation home they were referring to was a small cottage I'd bought with my own money before I even met Mark. I'd saved for years to afford it, working overtime and weekends. It was my special place, somewhere I could go to escape the city. And occasionally, I let my parents use it when they wanted a weekend away. "Let me get this straight," I said, keeping my voice level. "You gave your house, the house I've been paying the mortgage on for 5 years, to Lily. And now you think you're going to move into my vacation home? Without even asking me first?" "Tessa," Dad said, frowning, "be reasonable. Where else are we supposed to go?" "That's not my problem," I said, "you had a house." You gave it away without consulting me, even though I've been paying for it. And now you expect me to just hand over my vacation home to you? It's not like you use it that much, Lily chimed in. I turned to her, unable to hide my anger now. Are you serious right now? It's my property, I bought it with my money. I get to decide who uses it and when. Mom's face had gone pale. You can't mean, you're not saying no, are you? That's exactly what I'm saying, I replied, no. You are not moving into my vacation home, not now, not ever. The table fell silent, then Mom's face crumpled. How can you do this to us, she cried. After everything we've done for you. We're your parents. Yes, and as my parents, you might have thought to discuss this with me before giving away a house I was paying for and deciding to take over my property. You don't have the right to refuse us, Mom said, her voice rising. We have nowhere else to go now. You actually have your house, I pointed out. The one I've been paying the mortgage on for 5 years. But you gave it to Lily, so now it's your problem to figure out where to live. Lily slammed her hand on the table. God, you're so cruel and greedy. You've always been jealous of me because Mom and Dad love me more. You've always been envious of our relationship. I stared at her, stunned by her outburst. Then I turned to her, suddenly calm. If Mom and Dad love you so much, and you love them so much, then why don't you let them live here with you? This is a 4-bedroom house, plenty of room. Lily's mouth snapped shut. She looked away, suddenly finding her plate fascinating again. That's not the point, she mumbled. Jake and I need our privacy. And I need my vacation home, I countered. Sounds like we both have needs. My parents started talking over each other, telling me how wrong I was, how disappointing, how selfish. I stopped listening. I stood up and picked up my purse. Mark, I think we're done here. The next day, my phone exploded with messages and calls from my parents and Lily. I ignored them all. Some called me selfish, some begged me to reconsider, some tried to guilt-trip me with reminders of everything they'd supposedly done for me over the years. I showed some of the messages to Mark, who shook his head in disbelief. I think I need to block them for a while, I can't keep reading these. Do what you need to do, Mark said, kissing the top of my head. Take care of yourself first. So I did. I blocked their numbers and social media accounts, at least temporarily. I needed space to think, to process everything that had happened. 2 weeks passed in blissful silence. No calls, no texts, no family drama. Mark and I fell back into our normal routine, work, home, occasional dinners with friends who didn't try to steal my property. It was nice. I was at my desk reviewing a marketing campaign when my phone buzzed with an alert. I glanced down and felt my stomach drop. It was a notification from the security system at my vacation home. Motion detected, front door opened. I quickly checked the app. Someone had used a key to unlock the front door but hadn't disabled the alarm system. The security company would be calling me any second to verify if this was authorized entry. Sure enough, my phone rang almost immediately. Ms. Wilson, this is Safeguard Security. We've detected entry at your property on Pine Ridge Road. Is this authorized? No, I said firmly, I'm not there, and no one has permission to be there. Please send the police immediately. An hour later, my phone rang. It was an officer from the local police department. Ms. Wilson, this is Officer Reyes. We're at your property on Pine Ridge Road. We have 2 individuals here who claim to be your parents. They have keys to the property but admitted they don't have permission to be here. I closed my eyes, confirming my suspicions. Yes, they are my parents, but they absolutely do not have permission to be in my house. I understand. How would you like us to proceed? We can remove them from the property, but since they used a key rather than forced entry, it's a bit of a gray area for charges. I'll come up there, I decided. My husband and I can drive up now, we're about an hour away. The drive was tense. I alternated between anger and disbelief. How could they do this? After I explicitly told them no, they tried to move in anyway? Who does that? When we pulled up to my vacation home, there was a police cruiser in the driveway. 2 officers were standing outside, and sitting on the front porch steps were my parents, looking miserable. Several suitcases and boxes were piled beside them. My father stood up when he saw us. "Tessa, thank God you're here. Tell these officers there's been a misunderstanding." I got out of the car and approached the officers, ignoring my parents for the moment. "Thank you for responding so quickly. These are indeed my parents, but they do not have permission to be here." One of the officers nodded. "Ma'am, do you want to press charges for trespassing?" My mother gasped. "Tessa, you wouldn't." I turned to look at her. "You broke into my house after I specifically told you no. What did you think would happen?" "We didn't break in," my father protested. "We used the key you gave us." "This is all your fault," my mother suddenly shouted, standing up. "If you had just let us stay here like we planned, none of this would have happened. We wouldn't be standing here being treated like criminals." I stared at her, shocked by the outburst. "My fault? You gave away a house I was paying the mortgage on without consulting me, then tried to take over my property without permission, and somehow this is my fault." "You're so arrogant," Mom continued, ignoring my point, "so irresponsible. We raised you better than this. We gave you everything." "Mom, stop," I said, my voice low. "You're embarrassing yourself. You and Dad just tried to break into my house to move in after I explicitly told you no. And now you're standing here, in front of police officers, yelling at me about how I'm being irresponsible?" That seemed to get through to her. She abruptly closed her mouth, but her eyes were still full of indignation. I turned back to the officers. "I'd like a word in private, please." We stepped away from my parents and Mark. "Look, I don't want to press charges against them," I said quietly. "They're still my parents, even if they're being absolutely ridiculous right now. But I can't have them staying here either." The officer nodded. "We understand family situations can be complicated. We can take them to the station for a few hours, give them a stern warning about trespassing, then release them. Sometimes a few hours in a holding cell can be a good reality check." I considered this. That might be the wake-up call they need. "Yes, please do that." I walked back to where my parents were sitting. "The officers are going to take you to the police station for a few hours. I'm not pressing charges, but I want you to understand how serious this is. You cannot just move into someone's house without permission, even if you're family." The car with the police and my parents left. While we waited for the locksmith, I arranged for my parents' belongings to be taken to a nearby storage facility. I paid for 1 month and texted the details to my sister, since my parents' numbers were still blocked. The locksmith arrived and changed all the locks. By the time we left, the house was secure again. On the drive home, I felt drained but also strangely liberated. For the first time in my adult life, I had stood up to my parents' manipulation and refused to be taken advantage of. "What do you think they'll do now?" Mark asked as we neared our apartment. "Probably go crying to Lily," I guessed. "She can deal with them, she got the house, she can take the responsibility that comes with it." I wasn't naive enough to think this was over, though. Knowing my mother, she would find a way to make me look like the villain in all this. She always did. I was right. A week later, I opened Facebook to find a long, dramatic post from my mother. It had already gathered dozens of sympathetic comments from relatives and family friends. "Today I learned what it means to be abandoned by your own child," it began. "My husband and I, in our golden years, have been cast out like unwanted pets. Our eldest daughter Tessa had the police remove us from her vacation home like common criminals, leaving us with nowhere to go." The post went on, conveniently leaving out the fact that they had given their house to Lily, that I had been paying their mortgage for years, and that they had tried to move into my vacation home against my explicit refusal. As I scrolled through the comments, people calling me heartless, cruel, ungrateful, something inside me snapped. I started typing my own post in response. It was time for everyone to hear the whole truth. I've stayed silent about family matters until now, but since my mother has chosen to make our private issues public, I feel I need to share my side of the story. Here are the facts that were conveniently left out of my mother's post. For the past 5 years, I have been paying the mortgage on my parents' house because they couldn't afford it due to health issues and reduced work hours. I did this willingly because they're my family and they needed help. 3 weeks ago, at my sister Lily's wedding, which I also helped pay for, my parents announced they were giving their house, the one I've been paying for, to my sister as a wedding gift. They did this without consulting me or even giving me a heads up. When I finally spoke to them after the wedding, they informed me that they had planned to move into my vacation home, again, without asking me first. They had apparently worked this all out with my sister before her wedding. She would get their house, they would take my vacation property. When I refused to let them move into my vacation home, they attempted to move in anyway. They used a spare key I had given them for emergencies and triggered the security system. That's why the police were involved. I didn't have them arrested, despite what my mother's post suggests. I did have the police remove them from my property because they were trespassing. I then paid for a storage unit for their belongings. If my parents need a place to stay, perhaps they should ask my sister, who now owns a 4-bedroom house thanks to them, and me, since I paid for it. I added a final paragraph. I've always done my best to help my family, but I won't be taken advantage of or painted as the villain for refusing to give up my property after already paying for theirs. Family goes both ways. It's about mutual respect, not just taking whatever you want because we're family. I hit post before I could second guess myself. Mark read it over my shoulder and gave me a thumbs up. The response was immediate. Comments started rolling in, from cousins, aunts, uncles, even some of my parents' friends. But unlike the comments on my mother's post, these were supportive. I had no idea you were paying their mortgage. That's so unfair of them. Wait, they gave away a house you were paying for? I should have felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt tired. This whole situation was exhausting, and broadcasting it publicly didn't exactly feel great, even if I was just defending myself. 2 days later, my cousin Jessica called me. "Hey, I wanted to check on you," she said. "Your parents tried to go back to their house, Lily's house now, but she wouldn't let them in." I sat up straighter. Seriously? Yeah, apparently she told them it's her house now and there's no room for them. They're staying in some crappy apartment now, and your mom had to go back to working full-time to afford the rent. I didn't know how to feel about that. Part of me thought they deserved it, this was the situation they had created for themselves. But another part of me still felt a pang of sympathy. They were still my parents, even if they had treated me unfairly. After we hung up, I told Mark what Jessica had said. "It's just karma," he remarked. Yeah, I agreed, but I don't feel as satisfied as I thought I would. That's because you're a good person, Tessa. Unlike some people we could mention. Over the next few weeks, my parents tried to contact me several times. I saw their names on my phone but couldn't bring myself to answer. I wasn't ready. The hurt was still too fresh. One night, as Mark and I were getting ready for bed, he asked me, "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" I thought about it, maybe someday, not for their sake, but for mine. Carrying around all this anger isn't healthy. And Lily? I sighed, that's more complicated. She knew what they were planning, she was part of it. And then she turned them away when they needed her. At least you know where you stand now, Mark said, pulling me close. No more illusions about who's important to them and who isn't. He was right. As painful as this whole experience had been, it had torn away the pretense. I'd spent years trying to win my parents' approval, trying to be as special as Lily was to them. Now I knew that was never going to happen, and strangely, that knowledge was freeing. The next morning, I saw another call from my mother. This time, I let it go to voicemail. Tessa, her voice was different now, smaller, less demanding. We made a mistake, a big one. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But please call us back, we need to talk. I deleted the message without calling back. Maybe someday I'd be ready to hear their apology, if that's what they were offering. Maybe someday I'd be ready to have them back in my life, on new terms with clear boundaries. But not today. Today, I was still learning how to put myself first, something I should have done a long time ago. As for my vacation home, I decided to list it for rent. The extra income would be nice, and I liked the idea of the place being used and enjoyed rather than sitting empty as a reminder of everything that had happened.